Baseball is dead.
Rest in peace, baby.
Jay Hay!
That's right.
Jay Hay!
The two-man weave.
Here we go. It's me and the Jay Hay kid on the mic for the biggest, the most highly anticipated signing of the offseason. Roki Sasaki. The Roki Sasaki hype train has landed at the station. That station is right here in my backyard in Hollywood. Welcome to Hollywood, Sasaki. The Dodgers, Jay, once again, continue to collect their stones and land Japanese phenom, Roki Sasaki. You and I and the boys, Jared and Jake and Joe, those fellas are unavailable right now, but we were chopping this up. I mean, everybody's been chopping it up.
Yeah, for sure.
And what the implications are, what this was going to mean. What is your immediate reaction, if there's any shock to it whatsoever? Because I think I speak for a lot of people. Not much shock. I even tweeted out, oh, didn't see that. I mean, we all saw it coming, especially when you talk about the implications and the reports that were happening a long time ago. So, Jay Hay, initial thoughts with Sasaki.
So initial thought off the field is that I feel like I kind of got played a little bit in this whole thing where he did end up going to the team that everybody like cynically said he was going to the entire time, and that all of this drama was manufactured. I don't know whether that's the case or not. I obviously wasn't partial to the negotiations, but I do feel like this, is he going to the Padres? Oh, do the Blue Jays have a real chance? And no, it really is just the Dodgers in the end. That I felt a little bit silly about that, but after you push that aside, my on the field impressions, which are much more important to me, is that this may not end up as the best rotation in baseball history. In fact, math would suggest that it's fighting uphill to do that. But for my money, it may be the sexiest or the most electric or the highest upside, however you want to describe that rotation in literally baseball history. I mean, we're now talking about a situation where you can credibly argue that Tyler Glasnow or Roki Sasaki is their number 4 starting pitcher. Like, I don't particularly care what order you put them in, but Blake Snell, Yamamoto, Glasnow, Sasaki is now their front 4 rotation. And I don't think we've ever seen like the combination of nastiness and swing and miss in a single rotation with just upside oozing out of every pore. And that doesn't get into the guys that we've talked about that are depth pieces for them, who would be the highest upside pitchers on lots of other teams in Major League Baseball. So obviously, you know, from a competitive standpoint, maybe I would have liked to see him sign with the Padres, or, you know, you could argue that to be the face of the co-face of the Blue Jays would have been kind of cool. But in terms of tuning into one team and being guaranteed that you're going to see a star level pitcher every single night that you tune in, forget about the rotation, I think is just unbelievably cool.
Well, it's incredible to think that, and we've talked about this when we got the lineup and what that started to look like with the arrival of Shohei and Freddie, and you're looking at 3 MVPs, the first 3 batters of the game every night in, night out, essentially. And now on any given night, when you're flipping through the channel and you land on a Dodger game, when you're you're pretty excited about who's starting that baseball game. Like if you catch it within the first 5 innings, dare I say, you're pretty excited about the talent that you're going to see. So the overall collection of arm talent is just insane to think about. And I'll say this for the Dodgers, they continue to trend in a way where everybody's looking for the answer to how to change the game, how to make the game better or take it back to where it was, or how do we avoid these injuries, and is it right to be chasing velocity, and maybe by default, maybe by some of their own volition, but the Dodgers collecting all of this arm talent now gives very, very strong credence to the potential implementation of 6-man rotations, 5+ man rotations. And when I say 5+, I mean understanding that there could be built-in bullpen days, you know, and of the like. So does the Dodgers not only collection of arm talent and their ability or maybe inability to keep guys healthy, but the talent still being there, does that continue to lend itself to them adapting to a landscape that they are also at the same time helping change? They're helping shape it this way.
Yeah. And I understand people's concerns about like, the Dodgers have loaded up to such a degree that, you know, it is exposing like flaws in the structural like consistency of the sport and how the finances are team to team. And I'm not going to get into all of that. But what I will say and push back on from a fan perspective is that while I'm not sure that I want the sport to be structured this way for the entirety of its history, I do think if you're looking for something to appreciate in all of this, we may be looking at one of the greatest collections of talent that any team has ever, for pitching staff and offense, like that we've literally ever seen in the history of baseball, that has been going on for 150 years. You know what I mean? And the 2025 version, where we already thought this was the case with the 24 version, right? The 25 version may end up being one of the short list most talented and potentially greatest teams. A lot of baseball to be played, but greatest teams of all time. And when I was listing the starting pitchers earlier, Snell, Yamamoto, Glasnow, Sasaki, the guy I didn't name is Shohei Ohtani, who at some point, of course, will resume pitching for them on a regular basis. And in terms of expectations for what they're going to deliver in the 25 season, it's crazy to consider that Ohtani may be the fifth most important starting pitcher on the Los Angeles Dodgers. It's a wealth that we've never seen.
No, it really is. And we're not even talking about guys that have flashed incredible talent and unfortunately have fallen into that unhealthy bucket, a guy like Dustin May, right? So when you start to really think about the depth and the potential availability of all of these arms on any given sort of schedule, that becomes very, very scary. I hate to do it. But we have to.
We must.
We have to entertain what it's like being a Toronto Blue Jays fan.
It's crazy
right now. And because a lot of people, I don't think, are necessarily aware of what the Toronto Blue Jays, I think, have available to them, have been positioning themselves to try to achieve, and are trying to establish sort of a similar pipeline, or reestablish a similar pipeline, if you will, overseas in Japan. And when you talk about having the finances to do so and being in on the talent that they've been on, unfortunately, they've missed out on all of that same talent as well. But does this, if you're a Blue Jays fan, does this sting any more than missing out on Shohei, because you feel like, you know what, maybe that was a pipe dream and he wasn't that realistically close to being ours, but we felt like we got a taste of what that relationship could be like if we were able to get somebody to commit, and they just couldn't get that from Sasaki either. So now, Jay, they're quite literally standing there with nothing in their hands.
I don't know which is worse. What I do know is that it's crazy that the world conspired to find a unique way to fuck the Blue Jays this time, as opposed to because the Ohtani thing was kind of like, the report about him being in the plane or whatever. And it's like, everybody's going crazy. And so they were kind of duped by a false report. That's okay. And just maybe the general pursuit overall, that is certainly heartbreaking in a unique way. This, like, earlier today, they were making transactions to increase their bonus pool to presumably make their offer more attractive, or because I'm convinced, I don't think anybody would disagree. I don't think you make that sort of trade if, as a front office, you don't believe that you have a legitimate chance. You're not going to just eyewash a transaction where you're purchasing $2 million in international signing bonus pool. Like, that's now. Go ahead.
No. But now think about this though. This has always been my stance, and this has been my stance since the Dodgers have started to develop some of the, or when I say develop, I mean create the core that we now see, and they've just started acquiring talent steadily and consistently, is eventually you're going to hit, meaning you're going to land on a successful season, and you're going to create a place where guys want to come. They just want to come here. So did I ever think personally that a $2 million, $3 million gap between what you could give him right now and going to the Dodgers was ever going to be something that any of these other teams could compete with? If what we knew about him, to the point of, I want to be able to compete during this window of growth and exposure to this league, and I don't mind, as we talked about, the level of anonymity. I don't mind being the fourth or fifth highlight. I don't mind being the fourth or fifth brightest star in this galaxy. And if that's okay, I can hide here in plain sight.
And that's fine. But like one of two things has to be true. Either the Blue Jays were legitimately in this, right? And thus finished second in heartbreaking fashion hours after making a trade that required you to absorb money, real money, in order to purchase our international bonus pool space, and that's heartbreaking, or they were never really in it and he was always going to the Dodgers, in which case the front office and in turn the fans and ownership presumably were duped to some degree. I happen to think that it was the former case, because I just have a hard time believing that they acted this whole thing. Maybe I'm naive, but
at one point in time, it's like fool me once, right? Shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And so now that's kind of what I'm getting at is this are the crosshairs, are they just missing their target? Are there too many people trying to aim at one target at the same time? Like, why do they continue to fall short? How do you continue to get duped? How do you continue to be messed up? Because for me, it's very short-sighted to think and honestly, if you are betting on yourself, I don't know that there is an amount of money that you can achieve up front. Like, we're talking about a $10 million cap, basically 10, and let's call it 12 if you're really able to pull some strings for some folks last minute, and you get your signing pool bonus up to $12 million. And the Dodgers say, hey, look, man, the world knows we got $3.5 million to throw you. Like, we're obviously talking long-term here. Like, is that even still an issue? And in my opinion, no. It's not. Not if you're talking about landing in Hollywood, where every season is postseason. Every season's postseason.
And that's fine. And that would suggest that the whole thing was kind of a sham, in which case
the entire thing was a farce.
Well, okay. And that's like there's certainly reason to have that opinion. I think I would lean in the opposite direction, where that the Blue Jays legitimately finished second, but I could also be incredibly naive. Like, as it relates to them, coming up short now on Ohtani, Soto, and Sasaki in pretty high profile pursuits. Like, it's funny to dunk on them to some degree. It's obviously not funny for their fans.
I feel terrible.
Two things though. Like, I don't remember an instance where a team pursued high profile players to this degree in consecutive off seasons and floundered so badly. Not only didn't get the players, but were so publicly like portrayed as desperate or in pursuit of these people, and then still didn't get them. Like, I just can't remember a team's reputation turning so quickly from, like, I know it's been years, but like, to go from like one of the most promising futures 5-year windows in Major League Baseball to a literal laughing stock among a decent number of fans that are following the offseason is an incredible descent. The simpler explanation, which doesn't necessarily conflict with what I just said, is that in all of these pursuits, they just haven't been the best option. They have not been the most compelling package when you take status of team location, and dollars offered in any of these cases. And unfortunately, like, I think that's a legitimate thing to throw against like a cold water on the Toronto stuff, is that they weren't the best option for Shohei Ohtani. Probably. They probably weren't the best option for Juan Soto, and they probably weren't the best option for Roki Sasaki. And it's admirable that they made those pursuits to some degree and were willing to throw a lot of money around in 2 of the 3 and make a lot of effort in the 3rd, at least. But that they didn't get those people is embarrassing, but also taken individually, I don't think should be that surprising.
It just, and you bring up an interesting point and because I think we've all been trying to put our finger on why the Blue Jays continue to come up short. And if it's like where do you look? Like, if you're listing reasons why the Blue Jays as a whole, as a destination, have become so, whether it's a combination of being unattractive and like misguided pursuits, why are they continuing to come up short? Because if it's ownership, okay, it's ownership. If it's not ownership, then, and when I say ownership, I mean deals, like, being able to compete financially, which, as we've highlighted, as you've laid out, they've been able to compete because they're in the conversations, unfortunately, to the bitter end of some of these conversations.
I think across multiple sports, this isn't just true of baseball. I think people are generally disinclined to leave the United States in order to go sign with a team that is outside of that. And I'm not here to debate whether that sentiment it should be that way or whatever. I don't care right now. What I'm telling you is that exists in the NBA historically, that has existed in Major League Baseball. And I just don't think that and I don't know enough about hockey to say whether it has or hasn't, but like in those first two sports, it's definitely been the case. And in these specific cases, the team status, I think, has made a real difference. I think if they were making these pitches, 3 or 4 years ago, when the trajectory of the team and the core seemed a little different than it is right now for reasons we've laid out in previous podcasts, I think they may have been successful in one of these pursuits. But you have a burden to overcome historically, being a team located in Canada. Again, that's not a commentary. That's just kind of a historical fact. And so their roster cannot overcome that. And as far as the reporting goes, while their numbers have been aggressive financially, they have not been 50 or 75 or $100 million more than the next closest team or whatever. So why would you go there ultimately? And so unfortunately, none of them have made that decision.
And here's the point with Sasaki too. Something that needs to be understood is when you have somebody like Shohei Ohtani, who has been the architect for the framework, for the modern day framework of how a player of his magnitude is going to start to essentially devise his own economic footprint. You have to realize that you have Yamamoto, who has followed suit and is absolutely reaping the benefit of an already established and a well-oiled machine in terms of off-the-field business operations are concerned that he can benefit from. And if you're Sasaki, buddy, every season's postseason. And if we're really talking about players these days being as smart as they could ever be financially because of the information available, and you are someone who is being offered an opportunity to come over and not only make your own impact culturally, but you have somebody that has spearheaded a business approach that you would love to copy. You would love to take the blueprint for what Shohei Ohtani has done and is capable of continuing to do and capitalize yourself on something similar, because all of those sponsorships, all of the things that are available to him simply because of two other fellow countrymen there are things that he will be able to tap into, I promise you, on a level that he just simply would not, even as the guy in a place like Toronto or anywhere else, in my opinion. And this is why, because he's not Ohtani, because he's not that dude. Okay. He's not a 50-50 guy and a Cy Young candidate. Cy Young talent, as we have heard and seen for sure, still yet to be battle tested here in this league, but I think we've seen the adjustments and we're plenty confident that they're going to be made. So all that aside, from a business perspective, simply a business perspective, talking about a situation where there is a finite financial compensation amount that he can receive here, we look towards the future. What do those dollars look like? And if those dollars are being generated by postseason after postseason after postseason appearance, which we think will happen, buddy, the money is going to print itself, and it's going to be Sasaki on the face of every one of those bills.
Yeah. And just to go back quickly, I know we did Toronto justice. I think we did Toronto's situation justice, but
San Diego.
No, I mean, I think it would have been intriguing for him to land in San Diego. I think, while they're not in any sort of similar situation to the Blue Jays, I think, if it's about winning championships or something like that and not slaying the Dodgers or going up against those guys, then I think you could easily look at the Padres situation. And maybe, I don't know whether he cares about the recent uncertainty with their ownership situation or the ugly legal path that could potentially go down. But like, if I understand why he wouldn't choose San Diego ultimately, even if we all were on the same page that was kind of an intriguing fit for competitive balance reasons. But, to go back to the Dodgers thing, like I understand why people are frustrated with the Dodgers landing another dude. And that it seems like maybe there's something broken within Major League Baseball, and maybe that angle will prove to be true. But in the short term, like I think there's really something to behold in what this team could be on a night-to-night basis, and the sort of I'm just so fascinated, and maybe this is something we could talk about on a future podcast, but I'm just so fascinated to see how, when they're fully operational, the Sasaki, Yamamoto, Ohtani, like, and even to some degree Glass now as the right-handers kind of build off of each other, and the similarities between their repertoires in at least 3 of the 4 cases. I just like the sort of like, or like, does the similarities in some of their stuff, like, does that play against them in some ways, depending on how you slot through? I don't know. There's just so much going on here with each of these pitchers that's fascinating. And I just,
dude, Jay, just look at their roster, right? Just look at their roster when you talk about overall talent, and like how many future Hall of Famers do you see? And let's put Kershaw on the roster. 4, 5?
Yeah, I mean, 4? There's 4 that I would say are essentially locks at this point. If we're including Kershaw, between Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, and Kershaw. And, I think we've talked about how difficult it is to project what starting pitchers are going to be Hall of Famers. But I'll go back to my initial point and say that if we're talking about per pitch, per inning, per outing domination,
Snell.
I mean, between Snell, Yamamoto, Glasnow, and what we're assuming we're going to see from Sasaki, and that's putting Ohtani aside for a second, or include Ohtani if you want, that's 5 of the 20 most dominant starting pitchers in Major League Baseball, potentially,
right there,
all on the same team. 5 of 25, if you want to be like a little conservative about those estimates, that's still a preposterous level of talent on one team. But for a person who's interested in all 30 teams or the league in general, I'm excited to be able to tune in to the Dodgers game on a nightly basis and basically be guaranteed that the person stepping on the mound is going to be like really nasty. And even if that's number 7 starting pitcher, Tony Gonsolin, or whatever it might be. So, or, number 11 starting pitcher, Clayton Kershaw, making his return to the mound. So
imagine imagine tuning in and you're like, oh, what? Oh, it's Dustin May and fucking 99 mile an hour.
Are you
frisbees
fucking kidding? I got to watch
just
Dustin May, man. God.
Right. Like, oh, he's piggybacking with God. Like, it just, like you said, you're not disappointed. Like, you're not going to be disappointed. So
watching Kershaw is going to be like watching pitching in slow motion by the time he comes back compared to these guys, which is going to be so funny. It's going to be like its own treat, because it's like, what the hell is this? He's throwing a 90 mile an hour fastball. Is that right?
Yeah. It's like watching one of those artists who do like the upside down speed painting, and it's done in like a minute. And then you're like, holy shit. Like I've got a couple of them up there. And I'm like, oh wow, I went from nothing to Tiger Woods in 2 minutes. And then like for Kershaw is like a watercolor paint by number, like very slowly, very meticulously. But you know what, man, what a treat. You bring up another point. I don't think we need to get into it too deeply. Just is it good for baseball? Is it bad for baseball? The competition. And I think ultimately, if you're a fan of the game of baseball, you want your team to behave in a similar manner, which means you just want to see your team try. And I think as the Dodgers continue to expose and exploit, justifiably so, some of the loopholes that exist, whether or not that business approach or that business strategy is applied or followed up by anybody else, I think maybe we're at a point in time in the game where that remains to be seen. Yeah. We got the CBA coming up in a couple of years. Like we'll see.
By the way, Kylie McDaniel with ESPN reporting that the Dodgers have traded Dylan Campbell to the Phillies in a trade that includes international bonus pool space. So Dodgers adding to their stash a little bit as well, presumably, to finalize this Sasaki deal. So, I mean, that doesn't throw water on the report. Obviously he's going to the Dodgers. That just confirms it basically. I don't have any final thoughts. I think I got them all out. You good?
Yeah. I think that's it. Nobody's surprised, but Roki Sasaki is now a Los Angeles Dodger. And Hollywood, those lights on the diamond, those lights in Chavez Ravine have never been brighter. We'll see you next Monday?
Yeah, we'll see you Monday. We'll see you in 3
Monday.
days.
We'll see you Monday in 3 days. Enjoy the weekend. We out.